I think there's got to be a way to get homeowners more involved in the governance of their association. But what most people don't understand, this is an experiment in self-governance. If you don't get involved, somebody has to be there to make these decisions. If you don't get involved, you don't even know. It's kind of like the rest of our government. If you don't know what these people are doing that you've elected, shame on you.
A regular highlight of the HOA Insights podcast is our Board Heroes feature, where we dedicate one episode each month to celebrate the remarkable efforts of HOA board members. To us, a board hero is one of the 2 million elected volunteers who deserve recognition for excelling in a role that often goes unnoticed. Today, we're excited to spotlight one of these exceptional board heroes and share their inspiring story. If you match our definition of a board hero or know someone who does, please reach out to us. Our contact details and those of our sponsors are provided in the show notes.
Welcome back to HOA Insights, Common Sense for Common Areas. I'm Robert Nordlund, and I'm here today for episode number 108 with special guest Jan Newcomb, another one of the board heroes we're proud to celebrate. I first met Jan many years ago when we served together in some CAI national leadership positions. I was on the Business Partners Council, and Jan was on the Homeowner Leaders Council. We're both from Southern California, so we established a natural connection. Jan has since gone on to she served a term on the National Board of Trustees, so she went further along than I did. And Jan's just the right person to have on the show. Jan has a long history of living in her association, has been on and off her board 3 times. She's currently now back on her board. So for some people, you realize it's just part of who you are. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode number 107 with regular co-host and insurance expert Kevin Davis, discussing the high cost of insurance and what board members can do about that to minimize costs at their association. Now, if you missed that important episode or any other prior episode, you can find them on our podcast website, hoainsights.org, on your favorite podcast platform, or on our YouTube channel. But better yet, subscribe to the podcast in order to get every episode delivered right to your phone or mobile device. And those of you watching on YouTube can see the HOA Insights mug that I have here. It features a rundown association and some board members talking to each other. You can get something like that from our merch store, which you can browse through from our hoainsights.org website or the show notes. And you'll find we have plenty of free items like board member Zoom backgrounds and some specialty items like this mug that I have here for sale. But you can get one for free. Just go to our merch store, pick out the mug you'd like, and email me at podcast@reservestudy.com, mentioning episode number 108 mug giveaway. And if you're the 10th person, we'll ship that mug to you free of charge. We enjoy hearing from you, and most episodes are in response to a topic you've recommended. So do stay in contact, letting us know what questions you have, topics that you'd like to hear about. So leave us a voicemail at 805-203-3130. Leave a comment on the YouTube video or send us an email at, again, podcast@reservestudy.com. But back to today's episode. Jan Newcomb has her JD degree, so she understands rights and responsibilities and liability exposure. She was a certified mediator and ombudsman for McDonnell Douglas. She's a small business owner, and for the purpose of today, she's a 39-year homeowner at her townhome in Southern California. Jan's a person who cares. She sees the future, and she wants to create a better future for anyone in her sphere of influence. She's often interviewed for community association publications, and that ranges from her local CAI chapter to the National Common Ground magazine. So, Jan, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Well, tell me what got you started in this. What drew you to community association homeownership and living in an association?
Well, it started even longer than 39 years ago. I was actually president of a previous association in Tustin. But how I got on the current board is there was, I believe it was a treasurer that was on the board many, many years ago who passed away. And because I was one of the few people attending board meetings, they thought, maybe you could take over. So I got appointed. That was the beginning of a very long journey. Yeah.
Yes. I think most board members have a story that's one of two types. One type is there was an emergency and I needed to help. Or number two, it was kind of an accident, right place at the right time, right place at the wrong time. We had one person on the program who bought the home of the former president, and he said, "So, I assume you can be president now?" And he said, "I guess so."
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you can do it, I can do it. What was your initial impression about being on the board? Since you had seen the board acting, the board doing it, you were one of the few people who were interested enough to attend.
Well, I would say, even though I had been attending board meetings, I really didn't know what I was getting into, because when I was a board member previously, I think my recollection is there have been so many more laws now that are impacting us in California in terms of how we have to operate as an HOA. It's a lot more complicated now than it was then.
What role were you filling there? What were you trying to accomplish? How did you feel? Did you fit well on the board?
Well, the man that passed away was the treasurer, and that is the last job I should have. So no, I think I just became like a board member at large or something. I don't remember now.
Okay, so it wasn't your particular skill set.
No, not at all.
Got it. Tell me more about being a board member at your association. How long are the terms?
They're 2 years, and then you have to run for election again. And you have 3 people being elected in 1 year, and then the next year it's 2. So they don't elect new board all at the same time.
So it's not an entire change of administration.
Right.
I would think that helps with continuity at the association.
We have a lot of continuity because it's hard to find people to run for the board. So
let's talk about that.
And there's no term limits. There's no term limits.
Okay. So when someone runs for the board, half of their job in the back of their mind is looking for someone to replace them. And if you can't find someone to replace them, it means that you end up serving 2 or 3 terms, something like that?
That's pretty much what happens. Yeah.
Okay. So what got you off the board the first time?
The very first time I was on the board, I was still working full time. And I just found, I was a single parent. I was working full time, and it just got to be too much to deal with. So I think that was probably the biggest reason.
Did things change at the association in a noticeable manner when you stepped off the board? Did the whole place fall apart is what I'm trying to find out.
It might have in a way, but I don't think we realized it at the time. What we're facing now is the fact that a lot of previous boards didn't raise the dues when they should have. So they were popular with the homeowners. But we're now faced with, having to catch up, and we ended up having to get a roof loan to replace our roof. So that's been a significant financial struggle there.
I am just in such a lucky position because I get to speak to subject matter experts, board member experts, all regularly on a weekly basis. And there was one conversation I had where I was speaking to someone, he likened it to a automobile race, like a NASCAR race, where inflation is going round and round and round and round and round. And if you pull into the pits and don't raise your assessments 1 year, you're losing ground. And that's a problem that we see so many associations falling into, that they are looking more at trying to minimize their spending rather than taking good care of the place. So let me ask that. Have your property values suffered, or are they doing okay?
Well, they're crazy. I mean, they're compared to what I paid for the place, it's worth a whole lot more money now.
Is your association a strong presence in the local marketplace? Is it would you say, a desirable place to live?
Oh, definitely. It was built in the early 70s when there was a lot of construction going on in Orange County. So we're 50 years old now. And what I'm noticing is the places that are being built now, they may be beautiful homes, but they don't have a lot of land around them. We have acres of beautiful lawns, beautiful trees. And they just don't build places like that anymore. I think we're very fortunate, but it's also expensive to maintain.
There you go. And we get back to assessments. And I want to touch on that because so many think that this is a better association or a worse association just because of how much the assessments are. And if you have a lot of grounds, that can be absolutely wonderful for your eyes to be able to see the landscaping, to see some elbow room. And landscaping takes money. And hasn't that been one of your projects there?
It's one of the biggest expenses. And I remember driving into the association when I was looking to buy a home. I mean, when I saw it, it was just like, this feels like where I would like to be. It was beautiful. And it still is.
Yeah, it drew you in. So if you were to compare a home in your association compared to a home across the street down the road, your assessments would be higher just because you've got a lot more landscaping to take care of. But then again,
there's more involved than that, though, because what I think what people do is they compare the numbers. This association has only $250 a month and this association has $600. Well, what they don't know is how much those assessments cover. Like we actually pay for, even though we're a planned development, we pay for all the insurance on the homes, the structures. Okay. We maintain the painting and the asphalt and the trees and the lawns. Another association may have lower assessments, but it may not cover nearly as much amenities or, insurance or things like that are certainly very expensive now.
Right. Or utilities. In the association where I lived and what got me started in this industry, the water bill and the power bill were rolled up into my monthly assessments.
Oh, and that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, exactly. You could say that a neighboring association's assessments were lower, but that person had to write 2 more checks to the water bill and the power utility.
So people just compare numbers, and I don't think they have an idea of really, it's not a apples to apples comparison.
Well, let's go from that. Let's talk about what you on the board tried to create there. Did you have priorities? When you first rolled into that association, said, yeah, I could live here. Can I afford it? And you started to go down that path of buying a home there. Is that what what in your mind have you been trying to uphold in your time on the board at your association?
Well, we're trying to preserve the look of the community, obviously. And we're also trying to get our reserves back up, higher because they didn't save enough over the years. We're fairly well funded, but we definitely need to continue to put money away because we're a 50-year-old community now. And so there's more things that need to be fixed.
Well, there's more consequences because you can be in a brand new association and not put any money aside to reserves and you go outside and it looks great. But if you're not keeping up with a 30 or 40 or 50 unit association, you're going to see the consequences pretty quick because the age is there and it does need ongoing maintenance. So that's an important thing. Okay, you talk about the look of the association. What about the things that you can't see, the chemistry, the peacefulness, the community aspect? How have you been able to work to make it a nice place where when you see a neighbor, you smile?
If you see the neighbor.
Yeah. Okay. Good. You're good. And nowadays we are in our homes more.
They could be on a computer somewhere, right?
Right. They could be on a computer or watching something on the internet, and you're not going to and from work as much as we used to be. Let's talk about one thing in particular. You have more grounds. Does that mean that you have people out walking? Do you have more people with dogs out walking dogs? Is that a good thing for community?
Lots of dogs, lots of kids. We had an interesting turnover the first time there was turnover in the community. I assumed that we would have new families with young children. Well, what happened the first time we turned over, we got a lot of older people that were downsizing from big homes.
Interesting.
And so it started looking like a 55 and plus community. Now, then the next turnover, now we've got a lot of young families, young children. We definitely have a lot more renters because the people that have lived there for a long time or have owned the homes for a long time, and I'm a good example, we don't want to sell because we'd have to pay capital gains taxes. So people who have moved have just turned their properties into rentals.
Okay, so what you've been able to see is that the character of the association has changed a little bit from
Yes.
just the composition, the dynamic of who is living there. You talked about the turnover, so that went from original owners to maybe the next wave of people buying in. Talk to me more about that. Has the association become more diverse? Has it scrambled enough, or does it tend to go kind of in waves in your observation?
Like I say, the first wave was older people downsizing. Second wave was young families coming back in. But we do have a lot of rentals, which I believe has changed the association because the owners may be living in another state and they're not engaged with the association like they used to be.
Okay. Does that create more of a delinquency problem, or are those owners who are
No,
vested in the association and they're good to go?
no, I don't, no, it really hasn't caused that kind of a problem. I think the problem it has caused is that a lot of the people that are owners who live out of state now, they're not involved with the association like they might have been before, in terms of
Mm.
volunteering on a committee or being on the board or things like that.
Well, let me get back to that. One of the first things you were talking about was getting replacements for people on the board and board member candidates. And if you have, as you see the number of renters go up and those absentee owners moving out, the pool of board member candidates gets smaller and smaller. At the same time, like you were saying, the laws are there's more laws to comply with. In California, there's the Davis-Sterling Act. I think I remember the first version of the Davis-Sterling Act was 7 pages, and now it's, I don't
Oh
know,
my
30,
gosh,
30,
huge.
40, 50.
It's a
Yeah,
huge book.
it's a book. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some attorneys that have books on it. And then the complexities of an older association. How do you recruit board members? Tell me about that process at your association.
Well, we try, but we don't have a lot of luck. I mean, we've got a board that's been pretty consistent now for several years.
Okay. Do you try to establish a pipeline of people who can help on a particular committee or with a project and try to make serving on the board inviting and reasonable?
Well, we do have a lot of committees,
Okay.
and that
Good,
is
good, good.
that is a good way. And the other thing we do, which is permissible, is we do have people who are renters that are not owners that are on committees. Now, they can't serve on the board, but they can volunteer on committees as long as the board approves them so that they're covered by our insurance.
Right. I like that because then they, as a renter, have a vested interest in
Exactly.
their environment.
I mean, they are, even though they're not homeowners, they are part of the community because they are there physically.
What keeps drawing you back to the board?
Well,
You've served multiple cycles yourself.
yes. Well, I think the big thing for me, and it's true not only for myself, but for the people I serve, it's our biggest investment. And I want to keep it looking great so that we protect our investment, but we also continue to be able to enjoy a beautiful community.
I got onto my board when the president resigned. I was the only person, or I think there was two of us, in attendance at the board meeting, and the president said, "How about you be president?" I said, "Sure, I can do that." And then once I started working on it, that was my biggest belief, is that every hour I spent working on the association was going to come back to me in property values. And at my association, it was 71 times that. So I knew that my property values, I was protecting them, and I was carrying 70 other people along with me. And when you look at it as a board member, you have such incredible leverage to do so much good for so many other people when you're making sure the community is staying neck and neck with where it needs to be in your local real estate environment.
I invite you to drive in someday and see how beautiful it is.
For everyone listening, I live probably 2 hours away. In bad traffic, it's 3 hours. And I will literally, Jan, be driving by your area in about 2 weeks. I may take you up on that.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great.
It sounds like a nice place to drive by.
I'll give you a tour.
Uh-oh. Okay. That could be fun. Let's take a quick break, Jan. I want to come back and hear more about legislation, the kind of difficulties that has caused there at the association, and talk a little bit more about your priorities. But it's time to hear now from one of our generous sponsors, after which we'll be back to hear more about what we can learn from Jan's experience.
Are you part of a homeowners association or condominium board? Making the right financial decisions for your community's future is crucial. At Association Reserves, we're proud to serve communities nationwide, specializing in reserve studies tailored to your community's unique needs. Our expert team helps you accurately assess your property's assets, forecast future expenses, and develop a solid funding plan. Whether you're a small HOA or a large condominium association, we've got you covered. Visit reservestudy.com to learn more and get a proposal for your association.
And we're back. Jan, before the break, we were talking about the things you're doing for the association and property values and things like that. How do you as a board prepare yourself to do well for the association?
I think it helps definitely to make sure you get board member education because, like I mentioned before, there's so many laws and restrictions now on what boards can and cannot do, how they can do things.
Now, you're talking specifically in California.
Well, everywhere, but California and Florida seem to be the most places that have the most laws that are constraining, how associations operate.
And you've seen all that because of your exposure to kind of the national picture from serving on CAI national type things. Okay, so you're a board member in a high legislation state, so that makes it more complicated. Take me down the path. Tell me more about education. What does that mean? You have some legal training. Is that what you're talking about? Or is it other types of training?
Well, what I have found is the legal part of it is obviously important. And because of my education, I take that pretty seriously.
Right.
But it's important for board members, but it's also important to understand a lot of what managers do, what business partners do. And I especially appreciate the education that the business partners put on. I'd use you as a good example.
Thank you.
I really appreciate.
You're very kind. I'll buy you
well,
dinner
I
when I
appreciate
swing
the
by.
webinars because you help people understand reserves, and most people don't. So it's very helpful to, make sure you're not running afoul of the law, but also to find out more about how to do the other things like maintenance or finances or whatever it is, how to get tips on how to really do that well from people who are experts.
Let's take you to other things. You're active in your local CAI chapter?
Yes.
So does that mean going to the monthly meetings and hearing the luncheon speaker and seeing the vendors around the back of the room, that kind of thing, finding out who's offering what?
Yes, it's a great opportunity to meet vendors and talk to them about your needs and, whether they might be a good company to ask to send bids about projects that we might be doing. But also, I'm on the education committee and I'm also on the publications committee. And I've been doing the publications committee for a very long time. And I enjoy writing. So that's a fun job.
Okay. So you're a board member at your association.
Mm-hmm.
And you're on the education committee on the publications.
Mm-hmm.
You are is this like beating in your heart to serve?
I think what happens with me is if I'm going to get involved, I get involved. So I've kind of been everywhere in CAI. I've been on, like I say, the chapter board. I've been on the National Homeowner Council, the Board of Trustees. And it really gave me a good understanding of not just what I need to know in California, but what's going on in the whole country and actually outside the country now because we have chapters in other countries. it gives you a much broader understanding of what is really going on with community associations everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think what we're going to see in Orange County is a lot of associations like mine who are coming up on 50 years old. There was a lot of building going on in the 70s. And, those associations hopefully have saved enough money in their reserves to take care of what they need to take care of now.
Yeah, we did, I think, 1 or 2 episodes on deconversion, where condominiums unwind themselves, sell the land to a developer, and they become something else. That's because they just have become, they had become financially not viable anymore. And I'm wringing my hands here because I'm hoping that we're doing as much as we can to encourage and equip board members to serve their associations well. And I love hearing your tips to get in the stir. Go to your CAI events. Our company does free webinars. There's other companies in different industries that are doing webinars. There's so much to learn there. The benefits are so incredibly leveraged for everyone in your association because everyone's home values go up with the hours you spend. You talked about writing a lot. What is your next article? What's percolating under the lid there?
I'm actually writing a book, but it doesn't really have anything to do with associations.
Okay.
But for an article about associations, I think there's got to be a way to get homeowners more involved in the governance of their association. I think a lot of people, and I was probably like this when I first bought in, because I thought, oh, this is great. I pay my assessment. I don't have to worry about anything. They take care of, the pool and the spa and the painting and the landscaping.
Yeah, carefree living.
And carefree living, right. But what most people don't understand, this is an experiment in self-governance. If you don't get involved, somebody has to be there to make these decisions. If you don't get involved, you don't even know. It's kind of like the rest of our government. If you don't know what these people are doing that you've elected, shame on you.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned it earlier that associations do go in cycles. They follow the board member as far as what's the culture and the chemistry of the board. And so when you're on the board, it may lean this direction. When you're off the board, it may lean another direction due to Southern California wildfires, laws in your state, whatever. There's all these things or the demographics. You talked about some dogs and kids, times of renters, times of older downsizers. The community is changing. So it might have the same roof, it might have the same siding, but the community is literally changing from day to day. This whole idea of being on the board helps you guide that ship of the association, that nonprofit corporation, safely and successfully to the future. And I don't think we do enough to celebrate board members for, like you say, this experiment. In how they are the glue that holds this entire industry together.
Well, and all the people, the managers, the business partners, all of them too.
Yeah. Well, at least they're getting paid. There's a career for them.
That's true.
Your association, is it professionally managed?
Yes.
Okay. And I want to say full management or financial only?
It's in transition. Let's put it that way, because it was more fully managed when I first got on the board, I think. And what we have found is if there are some simple things we can do ourselves, we can save quite a lot of money. So I started a maintenance committee.
Okay.
And we have the most wonderful people on this maintenance committee. We've got a retired engineer that knows how to fix anything. We've got a guy who used to work for a major corporation and handled vendor contracts. He was in purchasing. I had a lot of experience with contracts at McDonnell Douglas.
Right.
And also a lot of experience with conflict resolution. But as far as maintenance, then there's another guy who's retired from Lowe's. So he knows a lot about parts and, he helps us understand whether something is bid reasonably or not.
Right.
In terms of, what the costs are. So that's very helpful. Anyway, what has happened, over time is we have started doing some simpler things just ourselves. And we've saved an awful lot of money that way.
Yeah. Well, I think there's two levels to that. One is a level that, yes, you're spending less on a, let's say, handyman to do those types of tasks. But when you're staying on top of maintenance, you stay so far ahead of the big deterioration that gets really, really expensive. So if you can stay on top of that, let me turn the corner and talk about board member style. We here on the program have talked about the 4 C's of effective board members, that they need to care. They need to be curious. What can I do about this? Why is this happening? Have the courage to take action and then to be able to communicate effectively. When you think back about what you've seen, what you've done, what you've learned from your CAI exposure, does that cover it, or do you have some additional characteristics that you would like to see more of, or that you see commonly in board members? What characteristics do you think of?
There's a bit of a dynamic that really goes 2 different directions. One of them is the business of the association, and the other one is the community culture, if you will, of the association. That's getting harder to manage because we have more renters and more people that may not be as committed long-term to the association. Right. So I think you really need board members that, can contribute from a number of different perspectives.
Okay. I like that. And that reminds me, I liked what you said earlier about getting the renters to contribute by being on committees, to being part of that culture of our community. This is our home. What can I do even as a renter?
I'm hoping that we can turn them into owners at some point. That would be wonderful.
That would be great. Hopefully they can get to a point where the owner finds out that this is a good renter. Let me transition out and they can become homeowners. I like that.
That'd be great.
Well, Jan, again, looking at the time, I don't know if everyone enjoys this as much as I do, but I've known Jan for long enough to appreciate her years of service. And it's great to be able to have her on the program today. Puts a smile on my face. Jan, so thank you for taking the time to join us on today's program. Any final thoughts to share on your board member experiences?
Just that I hope people will get more involved. I'm trying to figure out how to make that happen because we really need everybody to be part of this. So we're all in it together.
Jan knows. And we want to publicly acknowledge Jan for performing a thankless job well, for those countless hours she's invested at her association, for her local CAI chapter, and for everyone else that she's touched. I want to compliment the board of directors for working with her at her association, all of those people for taking their job seriously to act in the best interest of the association. Well, we hope you gained some HOA insights from Jan's story, and that it helps bring more common sense to your common area. And remember, if you match our definition of a board hero or know someone who does, please reach out to us. We love having board heroes on our program. Our contact details are provided in the show notes. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to another great episode next week.
You've been listening to HOA Insights, common sense for common areas. If you like the show and want to support the work that we do, you can do so in a number of ways. The most important thing that you can do is engage in the conversation. Leave a question in the comments section on our YouTube videos. You can also email your questions or voice memos to podcast@reservestudy.com or leave us a voicemail at 805-203-3130. If you gain any insights from the show, please do us a huge favor by sharing the show with other board members that you know. You can also support us by supporting the brands that sponsor this program. Please remember that the views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the hosts and guests, with the goal of providing general education about the community association industry. You'll want to consult licensed professionals before making any important decisions. Finally, this podcast was expertly mixed and mastered by Stoke Video and Marketing. With Stoke on your team, you'll reach more customers with marketing expertise that inspires action. See the show notes to connect with Stoke.